Haidt is very much a materialist,
Yes.
and Jordan Peterson is not a materialist.
Well, I don't even know if I'd agree. He is and he isn't. He's just not strictly materialist.
I've argued with people about this before, so I've kind of honed my position on this.
Okay.
You could believe that Jordan Peterson is a materialist because he's very careful to argue in a materialist framework.
Right.
But I don't think Jordan Peterson deep down is a materialist. I think he believes in the supernatural. Yeah.
So he's like, so you're saying that we're the same. I'm basically Jordan Peterson. I'm embodying the Jordan Peterson position.
This is why you like Jordan Peterson.
Okay.
Maybe, and I'm Haidt. I'm basically Haidt. I'm like, there's nothing supernatural, Jordan. Grandpa, shut the f up, okay? We're trying to have a conversation about science here, and you bring up all this crap. Let me give some backstory that you don't know unless you're following this.
A big nerd.
Yeah, basically. Unless you're a big moral psychology nerd and are following moral psychology since its inception. You know, Jonathan Haidt is a personal friend of yours. You've actually I do. Jonathan Haidt is an acquaintance of mine, and I do know him just through his book, so I wasn't aware of this being developed or anything. But Jonathan Haidt and Jordan Peterson, well, they go way back. Do you know the story? Can you tell the story?
Well, I didn't know about it till listening to this, where they said that, like, didn't they both work at the same college or something, and they just ended up like becoming friends because they could argue with each other about similar topics, kind of like we do.
So. No, I don't think so. I don't think they do. I don't think they sit down and argue like us. Jordan Peterson was teaching at Harvard, and I know this from his first interview with Jordan Peterson after Jordan Peterson blew up. But Jordan Peterson was teaching at Harvard, and then Jonathan Haidt wanted to teach at Harvard, and Jordan Peterson was one of the few instructors that really pushed for Jonathan Haidt to get a teaching gig there. So the social dynamic was very different. Like Jordan Peterson was like above Jonathan Haidt in the status hierarchy, obviously. And this, obviously he did Jonathan Haidt a huge favor, so he remembered him. But in this interview, this TVO interview, the tables have turned because Jonathan Haidt has this book. He's like he's doing TED Talks, all this. Like, he's giant at the time of this interview takes place. His Happiness Hypothesis book was big, and then The Righteous Mind was just, critically acclaimed, New York Times bestseller, all this. He's doing all these interviews. And he does an interview with TVO, which TVO, you'll all know, the agenda was Steve Paikin. Jordan Peterson's a regular on, right? So I'm assuming you didn't watch this interview, but I just want to play a tiny little bit of it.
I watched it, yeah.
Oh, you did watch it?
Yeah.
Okay, I just
want to play. They didn't have like a direct back and forth, though.
No, they didn't. They didn't. But I just want to point it out because this interview takes place when was this published here? God damn it, YouTube! You got to pull the thing way out in order to see. 2012. Yeah, May 30th, 2012. Okay, it's what is that? 8-9 years ago now. So what they talk about, if you listen to the talk that they just had, that Jordan Peterson just published, it's going to sound very familiar because 9 years ago, this happened. So I think, is it Jordan Peterson first? Jordan Peterson.
Okay, Jordan, where you don't necessarily have to take the same position as Andrew Ferguson on this.
You can hear that, right? Or
yeah. God, that guy's face.
Here we go.
But where are you on the thesis that he's putting forward?
Well, I've always admired Haidt's work, especially the work he did on Disgust.
Oh, the work on Disgust. Look at this. It's like a broken record. Yeah, we get it, Jordan. Read the rest of the book.
Why are you being so hateful and hurtful? What's going on here?
Jordan Peterson has an interrupting problem.
We got our old friend JP. Okay, we're the official internet JP Defense Force. You can't talk about
I know.
Right? You need to calm down.
I need to say some Hail Marys.
Look how young he looks. He's got his little mustache goatee thing going on. He looks like he's straight out of the 80s for some reason, even though it's only 2012.
I need to say some lobster hierarchies. Is that the Hail Mary equivalent?
Yes.
I need to say some lobsters. I'm sorry, Jordan. Forgive me.
And we've found that people who are predisposed to conservatism are people who have more disgust response. And so we can detect a pretty solid biological basis there for concern with order. The one place where I would maybe clarify, if it's a clarification, what Jonathan spoke about today is that those aren't taste buds. They're personalities.
Look at that. He tells him, listen, bud, fuck you. Fuck you and your taste buds. They're personalities.
Well, what does Haidt mean by saying they're taste buds? Maybe you should explain that first.
Okay, so moral foundations theory is this idea that we all have psychological programs in us that respond to certain moral intuitions. And he separated these out into 6 moral foundations. I actually think that there's 7 moral foundations. I think they missed one that has to do with property rights, but since academia is just swimming in fucking socialists, they don't want to acknowledge that everybody has this, territory, my stuff kind of moral intuition. Do you agree with that, Sitch? I mean, this might be the first time you're hearing that.
Well, no, you've literally brought this up 100 times on stream.
Oh, okay.
But
anyway,
well, I don't know if
it's
get
sidetracked on property rights.
I don't know if it would be its own foundation or if it just breeds into fairness. I mean, I don't know how you'd make the distinction, but it might be its own thing. It might be its own thing.
So these moral foundations, we talk about them on the show: fairness, cheating, careness, loyalty, betrayal, authority, subversion, sanctity, degradation. There's 6 of them. These moral foundations, the reason he uses the metaphor of taste is because it's like all of us all around the world have the same taste buds, but culture creates certain tastes for those taste buds that differ.
Well, wait a minute. We all have the same capacity to taste all of the flavors, but we all have, our taste buds are all a little different. Like people are born with different tastes. And I'm assuming that plays into Haidt's analogy.
Not so much. He's like, we all have the capacity for caring, but some of us care more than others, obviously. Like we all have the capacity to taste sweet, but some of us like sweet a lot more than others.
Okay.
So that's the taste bud analogy. We're all working with the same taste receptors, but out of those taste receptors, we're forming different cuisines around the world, different cultures with different palates. I don't know, what is it in? Culinary cuisines.
Haidt isn't arguing that all of our moral foundations are culturally learned, right? I mean, he's saying people are just born with different, are born differently. A lot of this is biological.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
But he's saying that everyone has the capacity to understand authority, subversion, loyalty, betrayal. We understand these things. Just when you're building a moral system, different cultures will put more emphasis on different factors. And obviously he traces this back to liberals and conservatives. Liberals care far more about harm, and conservatives care far more about authority subversion.
So, but when Jordan Peterson says he disagrees and he thinks these are more akin to personality types than taste buds, I'm not sure I understand what exactly the difference is.
Yes. I think the difference is Haidt's research doesn't involve personality types, and Jordan wants to muscle his research into Haidt. He wants to say, listen, these archetypes are more important.
You think that's why he wants to muscle in his own research into this?
Well, they're very similar. They've had a very similar path. Morality does deal with values, and Jordan Peterson's whole story is about is about values, human values. And Haidt comes along and he basically says, yeah, this is how we value things. He puts together a system that's very, very systematic, very, you know,
Right.
it does kind of leave personality and archetypes.
What I'm saying is it's
aside.
like, okay, so if you use this taste buds analogy, which I think is a good one, where it's like, oh, you know, people are all have this kind of different preferences, and then depending on your culture, you can sort of condition people to have certain preferences or certain non-preferences and tastes. And I think that's a good analogy. But I don't see how that really is that different than saying, well, you have a different personality type. Unless Peterson's only saying is that the personality type is set in stone and can never change.
Yeah, I don't know. One of the interesting things I think about the difference is, I mean, Haidt admits that this is the foundation. I mean, that's the reason it's called moral foundations theory, because he admits that from these tastes we build narratives and institutions on top of that. And Jordan Peterson is dealing more with the narratives and the institutions that we build above the moral foundations theory. This is why I wish Peterson would look more into moral foundations theory and really study it, because I think Haidt is onto the right path here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's play. See, maybe he'll explain it.
He doesn't explain much here, but I just
okay.
want to play this a little bit before we get into the other video.
They're sub-personalities. They're sometimes even represented as gods. They're not little mechanistic devices that shape our values. They're fully developed biological systems that perceive and have a viewpoint and have opinions and act in the world.
Are you just arguing with his metaphor here?
No, it's deeper than that. I mean, when people complain,
It's deeper than that. Is all his research is fucking lame. I wish we had a camera on Haidt, because Haidt does these little micro eye rolly things where he's like, oh shit. Oh, I'm dead serious. There's many eye rolls in here.
Okay.
Haidt has gotten to be a better speaker over the years. His first talk, he did this talk with Sam Harris before any of this stuff when he was first developing moral foundations theory, and there is a lot of uhs and ahs and oohs, and it's like barely legible. Yeah, bad stuff.
complain about Haidt, for example, not giving enough weight to cognitive processes. Part of that is that they don't understand how absolutely powerful these underlying systems are and how much they have determined human behavior over thousands and thousands of years. I mean, we are biological creatures with bodies, and the things that play behind the scenes in our mind are powerful beyond most of our imaginings.
Sylvia.
You want to listen to the commie? She's
So no.
Here that
Well, okay, so I still don't really understand what Peterson's saying, because the only thing that I understood that he said was that he's criticizing Haidt for being too dismissive of cognitive processes. And cognitive processes would be like your writer, you know, your higher functions. And he's saying Haidt is focusing too much on that. People just have these initial reactions to things, which is like, okay, well, I mean, that's what Haidt does, it seems like, primarily. But I still don't see what the difference is between saying personality types, because I would assume a personality type is something you don't control either. It's not something, I mean, I wouldn't consider someone gaining a personality type. I assume you're born that way, or maybe even you've heavily been conditioned that way, you know, as a child.
The personality type, I think the temperament, I don't think you can change.
Right.
Like
right.
the narrative that Haidt uses is structured. The brain is structured somewhat before any experience takes place. So your experience really sends you down the path of your temperament, but how far down that path really relates to the experience. Like if you're a rebel and you're in a situation where you experience a lot of injustice, man, you're probably that rebel thing is gonna just be off the charts. But if you're in a situation where you're a rebel but you experience very little injustice, hell, you might just, you know, rebel. Like rebellion may be you're gonna have a second slice of pie.
Right. No. Yeah, I like to think of it as if it's like like the ground, is like a mountain ground, and it's just filled with different holes of differing lengths and varies. And you could say, okay, well, like that's your brain. It's this ground that has all these different holes in it of different sizes. And then the things that happen to you is rain. And it, depending on where it rains and how much it rains and how deep the hole is, that shows like, how much the experiences can really shape you. Like it still has to have that initial grooves in your brain to really latch onto in the first place.
Yeah. All right. Let's see Haidt. Get ready. Like I hope fucking Jordan Peterson has his mouthpiece in.
Listen, this is definitely a collaborative conversation, not a combative one. All right,
dude. I'm gonna point
trying
every
to work
time
together here.
Every time Haidt is like, oh God, it's so passive aggressive. I love it.
Let's start by talking a little bit more about the righteous mind.
Okay.
And I'd like to know more about your conceptualization of religious instinct, religious impulse, something like that. It's like, how do you view that, and why is it that you've been asked to talk to gatherings of religious people, for example?
Yeah. So the story that I tell in The Righteous Mind is that humans are products of multi-level selection, which means that for the most part, if you read Richard Dawkins, for the most part, it's selfish genes create their survival machines, animals or plants, and those survival machines compete with other survival machines, and that's what we all know, sort of textbook Darwinian evolution. But while I love Dawkins' writing, I love the selfish gene, he for some reason says that plants and animals are the vehicles that the selfish genes travel on, but groups are not. He just says groups can't be. He just rules that out, if I remember correctly. And for most species, that works great. But for bees, for example, it obviously doesn't work. For bees, it's obvious that the unit isn't the individual bee. It's the hive where the queen is the ovary. And the argument that I make in The Righteous Mind is that humans show signs of some group level selection. That is, we're primates. We're like chimpanzees and bonobos in a lot of ways, but we have this ability to lose ourselves in something larger, to become completely unselfish, to sacrifice for the group. That is unlike any other animal that is not genetically 50% or more shared genes with all the other animals in its group. And so drawing on research on early human origins, and especially the period around from like 1 million years ago to 200,000 years ago, it appears that we did live in groups that competed with other groups for territory over all sorts of things, and that often wiped out or killed other groups. And so I think there was some degree of group level selection. We are everyone here on Earth now our genes are not a cross section of the genes that were on this Earth 100,000 or 200,000 years ago. Most groups left no trace, and other groups went on to spectacular success. So the way you see this is not by having an argument about altruism, which is where the argument is usually done. Steve Pinker and Steve disagrees with me on this. Steve doesn't think that group selection played any role. But I think if you look at groupishness or tribalism, why are we so tribal? Why do we love to paint our faces and band together and drink together and do all this stuff for sports? Why do we have these tribal responses? And I talk about my response on 9/11, on September 11th. I had this deep urge to display an American flag. Like, where did that come from? It was almost like a Jungian sort of like thing welling up from my collective unconscious. It was weird, but I had a real urge to display an American flag. But as a professor, I couldn't really do that because people would think I was a Republican. So it's a solution I came up with.
Well, it's one way of marking yourself.
Is that you laughing or him?
I just thought it was funny that he's like, I can't, how sad is it? He's like, as a professor, I can't put American flag up because then people will think I'm like the different political party.
It is super sad.
It's so sad.
It is. I don't like that.
But
come on.
But what Pearson says here is interesting. So
yeah,
go back. Like
if it's not a terrorist,
is Martin not a terrorist? Is to what?
Fly a flag. I mean, if you imagine that your group is attacked, the first thing that's relevant is who's with you and who isn't. And I mean, that was made public politically by Bush, right? If you're not with us, you're against us. And so that might be part of an atavistic attempt to say, look, guys, I'm definitely on your side. I'm not trying.
Well, it's funny because he was saying that he couldn't display the flag because it would show them that they weren't on. He wasn't on their side.
Well, on the intra-group side.
Yes.
But he said, he said he had the desire to. Where does that desire come from?
Yeah.
Right.
No, it comes from loyalty. You want to show
but
your loyalty.
that plays into what Jordan Peterson's saying. Is that it's the part of this to show your allegiance to your side.
Yeah. I do remember driving around and seeing all the American flags, and it was a real feeling of solidarity that I could get behind.
Remember, people they were selling those little car flags in mass that you could put out the window.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all over the place.
Yeah, crazy.
Trying to put it down.
Yeah. Well, okay. But but you're suggesting an individually adaptive reason for flying a flag, but you wouldn't need that if we didn't have the groupish tribal thing of let's kill people who aren't going along with us. So anyway, to bring this back to religion, my point is that we evolved in this dynamics of group versus group. And here I follow David Sloan Wilson, in saying, conflict within a group, conflict at any level brings about cooperation at the next level down. And so we come together to compete, we cooperate intensely in order to compete with other groups. And that would be a hallmark of a long period of intergroup competition, which shaped which genes have come down to us today. So anyway, we didn't evolve for big gods. We didn't evolve for Yahweh and Allah. We evolved for little gods and sprites and the god of this river and this tree, and we evolved to worship our ancestors, and we evolved just this really intense spirituality that manifests in a magical world. We have all of these beliefs that don't track reality, but they do serve a Durkheimian function. That is, they do serve, I believe, not to help us understand the world, but to bond together with others so that we can survive in this world in conflict and competition with other groups. That's the Durkheimian story. And in The Righteous Mind, I was so pleased that I could integrate two of my heroes in the social sciences, which are Durkheim and Darwin. They actually fit together perfectly on the subject of multi-level selection and even on ideas of sacredness and groups coming together. So that's the approach I developed to religion. The Righteous Mind, I originally thought I'd read about politics, but the subtitle is Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion, because they're largely the same thing psychologically.
So that idea of the sacred, we might ask, what are the preconditions for being able to live peacefully with other people? Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that, if we're all law-abiding, for example, then we all embody the body of the law. And so what that means is that
there's a huge eye roll right there of Jonathan Haidt. You couldn't see it because it was off camera, but
how do you know it's there then?
Because you can hear it in his voice.
It's just listening sounds. You're so judgmental.
Let Grandpa talk.
Okay, listen to this guy
imitating something. We're all imitating the same thing. And that's what makes us the same. And that's why.
So wait, what do you disagree with
in our conversation? That maybe what unites.
Well, I couldn't hear what he said, but he said something like, "Why are you bringing this stupid shit up, Jordan?"
I don't understand what do you have contention with here that Peterson's saying?
They're talking past one another. Well, everything Haidt said, he's not really. Haidt is talking about group selection and
versus individual selection. Yes. And
Jordan Peterson has also slipped into like the metaphysical realm here, archetypes. Jordan Peterson's bringing
that's what he always does. Yes. He's talking about Jordan Peterson stuff.
Yeah, I know.
Right. Okay, so what's wrong with that?
I just think it's funny. I think it's funny.
Haidt completed his thought. It's not like he asked Peterson a question and then Peterson just went off, ignored it and went on his own direction.
Haidt is very much a materialist.
Yes.
And Jordan Peterson is not a materialist.
Well, I don't even know if I agree. He is and he isn't. He's just not strictly a materialist.
Well, he is. I've argued with people about this before, so I've kind of honed my position on this.
Okay.
You could believe that Jordan Peterson is a materialist because he's very careful to argue in a materialist framework.
Right.
But I don't think Jordan Peterson deep down is a materialist. I think
I
he
see.
believes in the supernatural. Yeah.
So he's like, so you're saying that we're the same. I'm basically Jordan Peterson. I'm embodying the Jordan Peterson position.
This is why you like Jordan Peterson.
Okay. Maybe,
and I'm Haidt.
maybe.
I'm basically Haidt. I'm like, there's nothing supernatural, Jordan. Grandpa, shut the fuck up, okay? We're trying to have a conversation about science here, and you bring up all this crap. That's why it's funny. It's just funny. I did like this conversation. I was a little disappointed when they had Steven Pinker, but then once Steven Pinker was gone, I was like, oh my God, this is great.
You're so wrong. Anyway,
I want these guys to clash of ideas.
Yeah.
People isn't so much belief as the pursuit of something like a shared ideal.
Yeah.
And so,
I'm a little, yeah.
Well, okay. Well, let me just develop that a little bit, because you talked about what was sacred.
See, all of these are very like, I feel sorry for you because what you're saying makes absolutely no sense.
Just normal listening sounds, Adam. You're too judgmental here. You're too prejudiced.
I think I'm right. I really do. I think deep down, I might send Haidt an email just to see if I can get some secret.
Were you mocking Jordan Peterson when you said yes? And,
I'm just curious. Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't know. They're definitely friends, but I do think Haidt is a bit dismissive of Jordan Peterson. I do think that.
Hurtful.
Yeah.
And it's
truth hurts, man.
Seems to me that there's an association between what's sacred and what inspires awe. Does that seem reasonable?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Do you think it's reasonable to presume that the instinct for awe is the same as the instinct for imitation, for mimicry?
I don't think they're the same. No.
Yeah, man. Look at that. No. Shaking his head. Mimicry is not even one of the moral foundations.
But he's not talking about that. He said the instinct for awe. Is the instinct for awe, I don't know if I'd say it's the same, but they'd be related, right?
But he should know the literature on this. The instinct for imitation is based in status seeking.
So
I don't think they're the same at all.
Okay, let's go into that a little bit. So I'll tell you why I think they're the same, and you tell me why you think they're not, if that's okay. Well,
please.
Let me give you an example. People can be possessed by a spirit at a football game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the teams are cooperating and competing in the way that you described. So there's a tribal element, but overall they're immersed in cooperation because they're all playing soccer. Mm-hmm. And then they're competing to hit a target fundamentally, which is the goal of most sports events, is to hit a target. Okay, so the teams organize themselves into hierarchies of talent, etc. Essentially, there's a star. Perhaps the star makes a phenomenal athletic gesture and hits the target. And the entire stadium stands up and spontaneously, right? And because they're observing something that inspires awe. And that awe-inspiring act is to hit the target. And they're all in that stadium celebrating the act of hitting the target. Now, I started to figure this out when I looked into the root of the word sin, because it's hamartia. It means to miss the target.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Yeah. Wow is right. Wow is right. And so
the second wow was not as wowful.
That's pretty interesting, though.
It is
the root
interesting.
of sin, it means to miss the target.
Yeah.
That is very interesting.
Yeah, it is. Very fascinating.
the opposite of that is.
Do you not think it is? Do you not understand the implication that he'd be drawing from? Saying that that the origination of sin would be to miss the woolly mammoth with your little spear. It's kind of an interesting concept because that's not how we conceptualize sin at all today.
It is. He also says all sports, it has to do with hitting a target, which I thought.
Is
even
true.
chess?
Well, team sports.
Oh, yeah. I guess it's individuals.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you see in a stadium with that spontaneous manifestation of awe, the possession of the entire stadium often. And it's almost entirely unconscious because they get up on their feet before they think. And it's an act of worship, essentially, for that prowess shown, for that demonstration of how to hit the mark. And that's part of the imitative spirit, I think. It's part of imitating what's competent and heroic.
Okay, so I disagree with that analysis because I'm a Durkheimian. I just, what would Emil Durkheim say about that? Is it that people are so amazed at the skill with which that guy kicked a ball into a net? I don't think so. Sports events of the kind you describe, that never happens with soccer in the United States. For us, it's more football and sometimes basketball. But of the kind you describe, it's the pleasure, and anybody listening to this can probably think of times when they either sung in a choir or played in a band or played on a sports team, and you have that feeling of really becoming one. That is a I would say, a quasi-mystical or mystical experience. It's a sort of a loss of self emerging into something larger.
Yes.
That's my argument about this higher and lower level, the level of the sacred and the level of the profane. And Durkheim describes those are Durkheimian terms. He uses those terms. We can briefly enter the realm of the sacred. And if you're going to go see a football game, would you rather have an excellent view of the game alone in a room with an excellent screen, or maybe even just an excellent window? Or would you rather be part of the whole crowd that does the wave? I mean, think about the wave.
No, I agree with you.
Spontaneously
pause it
figured
for a
out
second.
how they could become a
Because I think they're both right. I think Haidt's a little bit more right, that a lot of the emotion people get from cheering in the stands is that they're all sort of combining together to be one, communal entity to some extent. But part of that is that they all take joy not only from being together in this oneness, but also take joy from the player scoring the goal. And thus it's like it becomes like, oh, well, we all scored the goal because they scored.
I know.
You're all taking part of it. So that's why, I don't think either of them is wrong. And that's kind of, it's not like an if then or situation.
But I just don't, I don't feel, I guess I feel awe when I see somebody do something amazing, but not because he's a part of my team. It's a completely different feeling for me, being a part of a winning team. Like seeing somebody do something amazing on a team that I'm a part of is just, it's different than you don't have to see you don't have to be on the team to
Sure.
awe
Listen,
from.
I don't feel this way either at sports games, but that's because I'm a fucking asshole, antisocial rebel.
Yeah.
So I can't draw from my own personal experiences here. I'm just drawing from the way other people react at these games where everyone gets very, hooked into the atmosphere. It's kind of acting together. And it's interesting because it's weird because what Haidt's saying now almost confirms what Peterson said earlier, that awe and imitation is connected to each other in some way. Because if people are achieving this religious awe experience, as Haidt says, by all kind of acting together as one, then obviously imitation is going to play a huge part in that. So it's weird because he's sort of confirming what Peterson said that he disagreed with.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah. So that adds a level of the mimicry.
Yeah, because you have to, in order for everyone to be as one, there has to be a mimicry. There has to be an imitation.
True.
And maybe that's the difference, because we can experience awe as individuals and we can experience awe as groups. I think, they're kind of related, but they're also different experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What moral foundation is? Awe is, there is not a moral foundation for awe, but it definitely is an emotion. Yeah.
But it's not a moral foundation. Your morality is not based around like emotions in that extent.
Are there emotions that can't be traced to moral foundations theory? I've thought about this before, but not really deeply. I haven't really cataloged all the emotions. Like love could be like traced to caring and loyalty, and like all of them. Love is kind of like a super combination of multiple emotions at the same time. But awe
is too, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, I
you
don't
would say,
know.
well, it depends. If we're talking about group awe, there'd be some element of loyalty, some element of sanctity, probably in there.
I mean,
And
I'm
then
trying
if
to
you're,
think of experiences where I've had of awe.
right. But if you're talking
Yeah.
about individual awe, it would be completely individualized. I don't like it wouldn't fall into a specific category because it'd be situationally dependent.
Yeah. Do you remember experiences of awe that you could
Sure.
trace back to a moral foundation? Yeah, it's a tough one, huh? Awe is like,
Well, I'm trying to think, would it trace back to a specific moral foundation?
I've
Is this the
saw
way
like
moral
the
foundations are supposed to be used? I never really conceptualized it this way.
yeah. That's why I'm curious. I'm
Mhm.
curious because moral foundation, like I pay attention when I feel caring or loyalty, betrayal, or any of the ones that are just totally strike to the core that I think this is authority subversion right here.
Right.
This is liberty oppression right here. I feel the oppression.
Uh-huh.
We were doing that with an academic agent. We were like, that's right. We're not going to watch your videos.
Well, okay.
Feel oppressed. Feel the oppression.
That's hilarious. So, like, okay, if people generally, like, when they have singular experiences of awe, okay, that's like they have a religious experience.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's like, oh, I felt God's love. So would that be like super care foundation?
Well, no, I was thinking like I saw the Grand Canyon. That feeling like, wow, that wow feeling. Or when I've been, when you go camping and the first night you look up at the stars and you're like, Jesus Christ, there's a fucking billion of them. It's like just a blanket of stars.
I see. Well, like when you feel like something is beyond you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't, but
I guess you
that's
feel
interesting.
small. That's interesting.
Right. It makes you feel small. That's interesting because I never, that sensation of feeling
tiny,
small, but that's not really what they were talking about because they're talking about the opposite of that.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, though, like, but that's interesting that you bring that up because that is a form of awe, and yet they have the completely opposite. You have one form of awe where you feel smaller than yourself, but it doesn't make you feel bad. It makes you feel good. See, but how is that? What's up with that?
This is why I'm with Haidt, though, because the two experiences that I pulled out so readily have nothing to fucking do with groupishness. They have nothing to do with being part of a team. They don't. Awe just is completely separate from those.
Well, but maybe
emotions.
you just don't like this word awe.
Mm-hmm. No, maybe awe is great. I love it.
No, but like, would you refer to a bunch of people? So a guy scores a goal, and 90% of the audience, except for the Sitches and Adams, all jump to their feet in exuberant joy. Maybe we just shouldn't call that awe. Maybe we should just call it something else.
Yeah. I've never experienced awe in some sort of sporting environment. So maybe we're just ill-equipped for that. Yeah. We would have to dig in on what Jordan Peterson means by awe.
Right.
I think of it as stars, obviously Grand Canyon. That's why I was asking you, what are you thinking when people say awe, what's the moment that you look to?
Right.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
Superorganism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, no, I'm not disagreeing at all. Yeah. And I do think there's a collective element of that worship that's exactly in keeping with what you're describing. And it does unite people in the imitation of a spirit in exactly the same way that they're united in a concert or when they're playing in a band. I think those are all manifestations of the same thing. And so I'm not saying that it's only individual by any stretch of the imagination, because there'd be nothing that would unite. See, in the stadium, they're united around that.
Right. Okay. So let's focus on imitation here. I guess the reason I disagreed with you is that imitation is such an important human ability for learning. The fact that we, and here I draw from Joe Henrich and others, their approach to cultural evolution, Joe's book, Why Humans Cooperate, and The Weirdest People in the World, and For humans, the nature of the game is not who has the biggest, strongest, or the biggest teeth. It's who learns the most, who learns the best. And we have all this optimization for learning fast. And imitation is a big part of that. So we do imitation, but we do selective imitation, and we figure who should I imitate. So that would be a sort of a lower level, ubiquitous, crucial human ability that we have, has nothing to do with religion, nothing to do with awe. But then I think we can bring our accounts together by saying,
see, he just pointed out, he says nothing to do with religion, nothing to do with awe. This is what I was saying earlier, that imitating is an individual thing.
Well, that's not what he's saying. He's saying that imitation is a very baseline biological, animalistic function.
Like eating.
We'll still say it's a step up from eating. And then he's saying that religion and awe experiences is like a step up from that. But he's going to bring them together. So let's see how he does this.
Now, then we also have this thing about we're able to come together in larger groups to pursue common interests, especially in competition. And as we do that, we use our imitation abilities. We draw on our imitation abilities. And so religious worship, it's always puzzling me. In Judaism, you daven, you bow, but it's not in sync. So that one is, I think, a little different. But often you sing, you sway in harmony. You do what everyone else does. And so
that's to atone.
The davening is to
atonement.
Oh, at one mint.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So let's go back to imitation.
Okay.
So, okay. So
I was so frustrated that he totally derailed the conversation.
No, but see, so I don't know. See, you're taking it like this way. I disagree. I think that's what he says interesting is that if the concept of atonement derives from people trying to get back to the oneness. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting because that means that
that
means that this idea that whenever we sin, we're breaking off of the community, the group, the oneness. And so to me, I think the thing would be that it's not. I think what Haidt should say, or what I was in a situation, is that I do think that the mechanic, the biological mechanism of imitation, obviously, is a much older mechanism in human beings, or just in animals in general. But then, like religiousness or awness or whatever this thing is that we're talking about, this sense of community. But obviously, as evolution, it always uses previous tools to iterate and improve and build upon that. So it definitely uses imitation and mimicry in order to achieve awness in this group sense.
Yeah. E pluribus unum is out of many one too.
Right.
That's our national motto. Getting back to the one. That's what a lot of people want to do.
Look, when a son acts out a father when he's playing house, he doesn't imitate his father, by which I mean you could observe the father walking across the room and making certain motions, and the son by no means precisely duplicates those motions.
Right.
What the son does is observe the father across a wide variety of contexts, extract out the gist, and imitate the gist.
Yeah.
Okay, so you made the claim that what we're imitating is the capacity to learn. But I would modify that and say, no, we're imitating the capacity to explore. And there's a difference there. Well, the difference is that learning is, in some sense, it has the connotation of a kind of passivity. Whereas, did you ever see that medieval drawing of the sky all covered with stars and the man on the edge of the earth with his head poking through the firmament? Does that ring a bell?
No, an actual medieval drawing or a modern cartoon?
Yes. No, it's a medieval drawing. It doesn't matter, but it's to boldly go where no one has gone before.
Yeah.
In the modern parlance. Well, there's a narrative that drives that, and that's the thing that's imitated. And I think all of those collective manifestations of immersement in the sacred that you're describing are opportunities for people to collectively engage in attention to and elevation of something like that.
Wait, so we certainly are an exploratory species, and just as when I was a kid, you put a.
I completely disagree with Peterson here, because I think you have to separate learning, imitation, and exploration. I don't think any of these ideas are interchangeable with each other.
Yeah,
I
agree.
would argue that the sense of when like the child watches their parent and then imitates them, or as Peterson says, draws a gist of it and then imitates that gist, which definitely happens. I would say that's completely learning. I would not necessarily call someone who's an explorer, who's driven to go out and seek something that's undiscovered. I wouldn't think of that as necessarily learning. I think it's a completely different drive.
And I think it varies. I think it's on a spectrum. Some people, this is one of the big differences between conservatives and liberals in the openness to experience. Conservatives are more likely to stay in the town that they grew up in, and liberals are more likely to move far away, which, I mean, one is exploring, right? And one is not. So
yeah.
I don't get that. Like, I've lived all over the place because that's me.
Mm-hmm.
But my parents haven't done that. My parents didn't like move all over the place.
But it's interesting because that manifests not just in your physical movement, but also when it comes to, you seek out all this intellectual information and explore it too. So obviously there is some connection between like a personality type or personality trait there.
Openness.
You're right.
Yeah.
Well, but it's not just openness, because it's openness and motivation. Because you can be very open and not motivated to do any of this stuff.
Oh God, that's got to be the most depressing. That personality type is terribly depressing. Can you imagine? All this desire for new stuff, but not the energy.
Well, no, I'm saying openness itself is not desire. Openness just means a willingness.
Okay.
Right?
I guess you're right. Yeah. Yeah. It was a lot of work to move all over.
Of course it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
A lot of planning, a lot of like bravery, I guess.
Mm-hmm,
I mean, it's easier to do when you're young. I can't imagine doing it now.
Right.
Terrifying.
I don't want to do it. It sounds like a lot of fucking work.
Yeah. Have you lived anywhere?
I haven't lived anywhere else. No, not
really
yet. No.
God, when I went to college, I went away from where I grew up.
Oh yeah, I guess that I'm not thinking about college.
Right. But after college, I was like, I'm gonna go live in New Orleans. New Orleans seems interesting to me. I gotta
just randomly decided of all the places to live in New Orleans.
Listen. This is funny because I looked it up on the screen.
Like Sitch, there are girls there. There with the beads and the Mardi Gras.
I had no idea about the whole Mardi Gras thing.
Sure.
I discovered though that on the last stream, I didn't even know this. I've lived in New Orleans. New Orleans is the most Catholic city in the United States.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. Dave is completely jealous. I've lived there. I've lived Catholicism. There was a lot of debauchery.
And a lot of voodoo and stuff too. So there you go.
I know, yeah. God, it was so fast. It was such a culture shock to live there. I was like, this is exactly what I want. Yeah.
I mean, I've been to New Orleans a bunch of times, but I don't know if I'd want to live there.
You don't know a place until you really live there.
Yeah, that's
until
fair.
you get a job there.
That is fair. That's true.
Yeah. You have to make friends because how are you going to go out and meet girls if you don't know anyone?
True.
Right?
There you go.
No, New Orleans was fun.
You get a mouse or a gerbil as a pet, you put it into a cage, it's going to explore. So, mammals are many of them are very explorative. Human children are too. Is that what I'm sorry, you're saying this is what religion is somehow related to our exploratory instincts? What do you mean?
Yes, that it's a manifestation of our attempt to abstract out what the essential element of that is. So, for example, in Christianity,
he has a completely different take on religion. That's like searching for God. You can tell how he's piecing it together.
Right.
Yeah. I guess I'm just far too dismissive of religion for that.
I think. Well, but that's obviously to me. I mean, that's obviously a piece of it. I don't think you can't deny that, right? Religion is searching for a higher meaning.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I'm a little more cynical about the world, and this is why I like Haidt's explanation that, we invented these moralistic gods so we could have power over people, and with that power came domestication.
Yeah, but that's a different. Wait a minute, but that's different because that's true. That can happen, but in order for that to happen, there has to be some feeling that that can be manipulated by others, right? Like you couldn't manipulate others if they didn't experience
They
this
don't believe.
desire,
Yeah.
right, in the first place, and the desire to believe.
Yeah.
And
I am.
when you're talking about like looking at the Grand Canyon or the stars, and you have this sense, and maybe there's a moral foundation that's missing, and maybe one of them is this search for like the non-physical meaning, the metaphysical meaning in one's life, because there definitely are people that are completely don't give a fuck about that whatsoever, and there are people that are very motivated by this, seeing what's beyond themselves.
Just meaning and discovery. Yeah, you're right. The moral foundations came about because Haidt just looked at the huge bodies of literature in psychology, like attachment theory was a giant one. And obviously the Care Harm Foundation came out of all the study of attachment. Reciprocal altruism was a giant field of study in psychology. So obviously fairness cheating came out of that. So there are all these, the Milgram experiments on authority, the Authority Subversion Foundation came out of. So he wasn't necessarily, so definitely there could be missing foundations out there, but he just felt best if you're plucking from the ether to look at things that have been studied, because obviously you can think, well, there's something here. There's some foundation here. So I thought that was pretty smart of him. But
it is.
Peterson, so I'm thinking like if there is some foundation about meaning searching, I mean, that just
some kind of spiritual foundation.
There has to be something in psychology about that. Every fucking psychologist in the world, I mean, that's like their thing. Like you got to get meaning in your life, otherwise you're going to be depressed. Meaning is the antidote to depression.
Right.
Actually, I guess meaning is purpose. Purpose is the antidote to depression.
That's true. That's a good point. Yeah, they're not exactly the same thing.
Yeah,
because
meaning
you can have
comes from purpose.
Right. Because he's talking about more something like the sense of that there's something grander than yourself that you're seeking out.
Even that is a groupish adaptation, because you want to become something larger than yourself. You want to become embedded in some institution that's timeless.
Yeah, but that's what's interesting is that for some people that does manifest institutionally, but for a lot of other people, it's not really. It manifests in some sort of metaphysical way. Yeah, or metaphysical desire, I guess, would be more appropriate.
Yeah,
and that kind of, and it's weird because in some religions, some spiritual groups, they're connected. In some spiritual groups, it's like, oh, you want to go find some sort of like joint oneness with God. That's kind of like that all people or all the universe is part of. But with Christianity or other religions, it's not. God is a separate entity. You're not really joining a oneness per se. It's sort of like more of an individualistic level. You're finding your own salvation, your own enlightenment.
Yeah. Yes. But they do say things like be one with God, and
that's true. They do say God, and they do.
Yeah.
They do.
So maybe we should read super chats, but I'll play a little more, and hopefully they'll get to a good ending place.
The faculty that's elevated to the highest degree is logos. And of course, that's translated into logic by the Greeks, but that isn't exactly all it means. It means more like exploratory, communicative endeavor, but also with a tremendous emphasis on the truth. And I traced that development back, for example, into Egypt and into Mesopotamia. And the Egyptians worshipped the eye, Horus's eye, and that's the attentive eye. It's not rationality precisely. It's the ability to see what's in front of you. It's the opposite of willful blindness. And the Egyptians characterized it as such because the god of Egyptian attention, Horus, was the antidote to Osiris.
See, I wonder why he says that it's not rationality, because Haidt isn't a rationalist. Haidt is a social intuitionist. So I don't know why he said that.
Osiris was the blindness of the state. He was the state and the blindness of the state. The Egyptians had that all figured out. And in Mesopotamia, the highest god, Marduk, he had eyes all the way around his head. And he spoke magic words. And he was the victor of a battle between a whole sequence of gods, competition between gods, that was likely the abstracted result of competition between tribes and their own, local religions. Because monotheism seemed to emerge like that. Imagine all these tribes with their local gods.
He's like piecing together a narrative that kind of parallels the evolutionary narrative that Haidt laid out earlier. So maybe that's a connection for him. Because Haidt laid out a narrative that there are a lot of humans that died out, but they died out because their tribe was not successful, not because the individual humans weren't successful. That we were really competing for a long time at the tribal level. That's his argument for group selection.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard for me to imagine groups. Like, I don't understand how you could argue against group selection.
Yeah, I don't either. There's a couple of books by David Sloan Wilson that just seem like undeniable. Yeah, I wish, this is funny because Brett Weinstein has a take, but he's never made any effort to have that talk with David Sloan Wilson. And it fucking pisses me off a bit, because whenever he talks about group selection, he kind of beats around the bush about how he has this lineage level selection idea, but he never really elaborates on it. And I really hoped he was going to elaborate on it in his book, but his book had nothing about it, which was sad. So the wife must have won that fight. It's like, why is this stuff in here? Come on, I want more stuff about cooking in our book. Can you imagine doing a book with your wife? Oh my God, I couldn't imagine it. All right, that's the sexist portion of the show, guys. Let's go over to Super Chats. Did you want to say anything?
No, I denounce all forms of sexism as a leftist socialist who doesn't believe in gender or gender roles and thinks that all women should be strong, independent womens.
Hi, you just listened to a clip from the Sitch and Adams show. If you like what you heard, you can listen to our live show right here on this channel on Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you want, you can super chat us. We read $20 and up super chats on the show and then do a follow-up stream on the following Tuesday where we read the rest of the unread super chats and interact with fans of the show. Subscribe to this channel right here to listen to the live show or to listen to more of our awesome clips.